The new cadet Alara stood at the edge of the arena, her heart racing with excitement and fear. This was the moment she had been preparing for her entire life, the chance to prove herself in the most brutal competition in the galaxy. The arena was known for its savage battles, where only the strongest survived, and the weak were quickly forgotten. Alara, a young cadet from a small unknown planet, was about to step into that very arena, and she knew that her fate could be decided in a matter of seconds. The crowd's cheers were deafening, filling the massive space with an energy that made her pulse quicken. The arena was enormous, stretching far beyond what she could see. The sand under her boots was cracked and worn, scarred by the countless battles fought on it. The walls around the arena were high, almost towering over her, as if daring anyone to challenge the warriors who stood inside. And yet, Alara felt small in the midst of it all. The noise, the pressure, the unknown, everything was overwhelming. But she couldn't turn back. She had dreamed of this moment since she was a child. She had trained for years, pushed herself harder than anyone could imagine. And now, she had made it. She was here to fight, to survive, and maybe even to win. It wasn't about the fame or the glory. Alara was here for something bigger. She was here to prove to herself that even the smallest, most overlooked fighter could stand among the giants. As Alara made her way to the center of the arena, the crowd's energy seemed to shift. She could feel the eyes of every spectator on her, sizing her up, judging her. She was a cadet, a nobody in a sea of battle-hardened warriors. The whispers started almost immediately. Some laughed, others muttered to each other in disbelief. They all thought the same thing. She didn't belong here. She was just a rookie, a child who didn't have what it took to last in the arena. Another cadet. Someone in the crowd sneered. She'll be gone before the day's over. Alara didn't respond. She knew the drill. She had heard it all before. People always doubted her because of her size, her youth, and her untested abilities. But she had learned not to care what others thought. She had a goal, and nothing, not even the doubts of the crowd, was going to stop her from reaching it. The Mew. Announcer's voice boomed over the loudspeakers, silencing the crowd for a moment. Welcome, everyone, to today's battle. We have a new face in the arena, a cadet fresh from the training halls. Let's see if she has what it takes to survive. The roar of the crowd was overwhelming, and Alara felt the weight of their expectations settle on her shoulders. She was nervous, yes, but she couldn't let it show. Not now. Not when everything she had worked for had led to this very moment. She adjusted the grip on her weapon and took a deep breath. This was her time. The time to show everyone, especially herself, that she was more than just a rookie. Out of the corner of her eye, Alara saw the other cadets. They were all young, all nervous, but there was a fire in their eyes that matched hers. They were here for the same reason, to make a name for themselves, to prove they had what it took to be more than just another face in the crowd. But Alara knew she was different. She wasn't just here to survive, she was here to fight with everything she had and to never back down. She had something the others didn't. A fire that burned brighter the more people told her she couldn't do it. The sound of footsteps brought Alara back to the present. She turned her head to see her first opponent entering the arena. He was massive, towering over her with broad shoulders and thick armor. His weapon looked heavy and deadly, a massive blade that seemed to hum with power. The crowd went wild as he entered, cheering and chanting his name. Kale, the apex predator. He was a champion, undefeated in this arena. The stories of his victories were legendary. He had crushed warriors from all over the galaxy, leaving nothing but a trail of broken bodies in his wake. Kyle looked down at Alara, his expression unreadable. To him, she was nothing more than another challenger, another cadet who would fall before him in minutes. But there was something in Alara's eyes, a quiet confidence that he hadn't seen in many before. A new cadet, Kale's voice boomed, his words dripping with amusement. Let's see if you last longer than the others. Alara didn't flinch. She stood her ground, meeting his gaze with a calm, steady stare. She wasn't scared. She was ready. The horn sounded, signaling the start of the battle. The massive doors at the far end of the arena opened with a loud creak, and Cale stepped forward, his eyes locked on Alara. The ground beneath them shook as he approached, each step sending a vibration through the arena. Alara felt the weight of the battle ahead, but she knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just about surviving. This was her moment to prove that she could stand against the fiercest of opponents, that she could fight like a warrior, and that she could win. The crowd watched in silence, waiting for the battle to begin. The tension was thick, and Alara felt it all around her. But she didn't let it consume her. She had trained for this. She had prepared for this. And now it was time to show the world what a cadet could really do. The fight had begun. And the training begins. Alara's boot struck the hard, unforgiving ground as she stepped onto the training field, a place far different from the gleaming, glamorous arena. This was where the real work happened, the sweat, the blood, the discipline. The arena was just the end game. The training grounds were where warriors were forged, and this was where Alara would either rise or fall. From the moment she arrived, Alara felt the weight of expectation. The other cadets around her were taller, stronger, more seasoned, and many of them had already been through the toughest trials. Their eyes were sharp, their movements fluid with a kind of instinctive grace that Alara could only dream of having. They were veterans of smaller skirmishes, gladiators of the training yards, and each one carried the invisible marks of battle. But none of that intimidated Alara. She had faced more challenges in her life than most of them could imagine. She had spent years on a planet where survival itself was a daily struggle. She had faced hunger, isolation, and endless doubt. What did these cadets know about overcoming the darkness within? What did they know about fighting when everything in you screamed to stop? As the drill sergeant shouted commands, Alara focused, tuning out the voices of the cadets around her. She wasn't here to be their friend or make alliances. She wasn't even here to impress them. She was here to fight, to survive, and to claim her place in the galaxy. The sound of weapons clashing in the distance, the thud of boots against the ground. It all became background noise. There was only one voice in her head, and that was the voice that pushed her forward. "Faster, cadet!" The drill sergeant barked at her, a grizzled veteran with years of scars and battle marks etched into his face. "Your movements are too slow. Pick up the pace." Alara's muscles burned. Her breath came in short bursts. Every fiber in her body screamed at her to stop, but she didn't. Instead, she pushed harder. The weight of her sword felt like 1,000 pounds, but she refused to drop it. Her hands were raw from the training, but she kept swinging faster, harder, until her arms felt like they might fall off. It didn't matter. She had no choice but to keep going. The cadets around her seemed to move with more ease, their bodies already accustomed to the rhythm of battle, their movements more precise. Alara knew she wasn't like them. She didn't come from their world, where combat was a way of life. She had to learn, and she had to learn fast. As the days passed, Alara threw herself into every training session, determined to catch up. She sparred with every opponent they put in front of her, no matter their size or skill. She fought with a raw intensity that surprised everyone, including herself. Each loss was a lesson. Every bruise, every cut only fueled her desire to improve. And though she wasn't winning, she wasn't giving up either. But there were moments, quiet moments, when she was alone in the barracks, cleaning her weapon or tending to her wounds, when doubt crept in. She was surrounded by cadets who had been training for years, cadets who had bloodied their hands in real battles. What did she have to prove that they didn't already know? Was she just another naive dreamer who wouldn't survive the real tests ahead? Her doubts only grew when the veterans would mock her during breaks. "You don't belong here, cadet," one of them would say, laughing with his comrades. "Why don't you go back to your little planet and leave the real fighting to us?" At first, Alara's heart would sink, but she quickly learned to bury those feelings deep down. This wasn't about them. This was about her. She wasn't here to make friends or seek approval. She was here because the fire inside her wouldn't let her quit. She was here because, no matter how hard it got, she knew she had something they didn't. A hunger that couldn't be satisfied, a hunger that only grew with every insult, every challenge, every failure. Then came the moment when everything changed. The drill sergeant, noticing her relentless drive, pulled her aside after a particularly brutal sparring match. Ilara was covered in sweat and dirt, her face bruised from a blow she hadn't seen coming. She had lost again, but this time it was different. Her opponent had underestimated her, and when she'd fought back, she had caught them off guard. It wasn't a win, but it was progress. "Cadet," the drill sergeant said, his voice more gruff than usual. "You've got spirit, I'll give you that. But you lack control. You need to focus. Fighting is more than just power, it's about the mind, the strategy." Ilara nodded, barely able to catch her breath. She was eager to learn, to understand what he meant. "I'll get better," she promised. The sergeant grunted, almost as if he was debating whether or not to say more. Finally he spoke, his eyes narrowing as he sized her up. "I see something in you, Cadet, but you'll need more than just raw strength to survive in the arena. You'll need a mind as sharp as your blade. You need to think 2 steps ahead." That was the turning point for Ilara. She understood. It wasn't just about fighting harder, it was about fighting smarter. The warriors she had seen in the arena, like Kale, the apex predator, weren't just strong. They were tactical, always thinking, always calculating. If she was going to stand a chance, she had to match that intellect with her own training. From that day on, Ilara's training took on a new focus. She wasn't just swinging her sword anymore. She was learning to outthink her opponents, to read their movements before they made them. Slowly, she started to improve, making fewer mistakes, landing more hits, and anticipating her opponent's next move. She still wasn't the best, but she was getting closer. The arena wasn't just a place for strength, it was a place for survival. And Ilara was starting to understand what it really took to survive. The first battle, the day Ilara had dreaded and secretly longed for, had arrived. The sound of the horn echoed through the training grounds, signaling the start of her first official battle. The air was thick with tension, the kind that only a real fight could bring. This wasn't just another sparring match. This was the arena, the place where lives were changed in an instant. Ilara stood alone in the center of the arena, her heart pounding in her chest. Her armor was heavier than she had anticipated, but she barely noticed it as she focused on the task ahead. The sunlight gleamed off her sword, a new weapon she had barely gotten used to, but the blade felt familiar, like an extension of her own arm. She had trained with it endlessly, but she had never faced a real opponent. This was it. Her moment, to prove she wasn't just a cadet, that she was more than just a hopeful dreamer. Across from her, the massive gates of the arena began to open with a slow, groaning sound. Ilara's gaze locked onto the figure emerging from the shadows. Her opponent was tall, towering in fact, with broad shoulders and a massive frame. His name was Kyle, one of the most feared warriors in the arena. A champion, undefeated. He was known as the apex predator. His reputation was enough to make even the most hardened fighters tremble. The crowd went wild as Kyle entered, the ground trembling under his heavy footsteps. His armor was dark and menacing, adorned with scars from battles long past. His weapon, a huge, menacing blade, was strapped to his back, the hilt gleaming like it had tasted blood one too many times. He stepped forward slowly, deliberately, his eyes never leaving Ilara's. The cheers of the crowd were deafening, but to Ilara, everything seemed to quiet down. All she could hear was the pounding of her own heart. The pressure was unimaginable. Every eye in the arena was on her. Everyone was waiting for her to fail. But she refused to let the weight of their expectations crush her. She wasn't going to back down. Not now. Kale's voice echoed across the arena as he sized her up. "Another cadet," he growled, his tone dripping with mockery. "Let's see how long you last." Ilara's grip tightened on her sword. She wouldn't let his words rattle her. This was it. The test she had been preparing for. The announcer's voice blared through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, today we have a newcomer in the arena. Ilara, a cadet with nothing but her training and courage to rely on. Will she rise to the challenge, or will she fall to the apex predator? The crowd roared. Ilara's eyes flicked to Kale once more. He was smiling now, a cocky, confident grin that told her he was already imagining the victory in his hands. But she saw something else too, a glint of arrogance that could prove to be his undoing. If she could take him off guard, if she could get under his skin, she might have a chance. The horn sounded, signaling the start of the battle. Kale lunged forward with incredible speed, his massive blade slashing through the air with deadly precision. The force behind each swing was enough to knock a boulder off its path, and Ilara barely managed to sidestep the first attack, feeling the whoosh of the air as the blade sliced past her. She had only seconds to react. Ilara's heart was racing, but her body moved on instinct. She parried the next swing, the clang of metal ringing in her ears. The force of Kale's strikes was overwhelming, but she had learned something in training. Speed could defeat strength. Ilara wasn't as strong as him, not by a long shot, but she was faster. Her movements were quick, precise, and fluid. She dodged, weaved, and struck back with quick jabs, always staying just out of range of his powerful blows. The crowd began to murmur. They weren't used to seeing someone like Ilara, someone so small, so seemingly fragile, hold her own against a beast like Kale. But Ilara knew that if she let him dictate the fight, she was done for. She had to stay in control. She had to make him play by her rules. Kyle's frustration started to show. His attacks grew more reckless, his movements heavier. Ilara saw an opening. As Kyle swung his sword in a wild arc, she ducked low and slid, under his arm, coming up behind him. In that split second, she aimed for his exposed side and thrust her sword forward. For a heartbeat, everything seemed to freeze. The crowd held its breath. Kyle stumbled, the blade grazing his side. It wasn't a fatal blow, but it was enough to make him pause. For the first time in the battle, Kale hesitated. Ilara didn't waste a moment. She attacked again, this time with more precision, more confidence. Her sword cut through the air, targeting the weak points in Kale's defense. She wasn't trying to overpower him. She was trying to outsmart him. She used his overconfidence against him, exploiting his anger and impatience. Kale roared in frustration, swinging his massive blade wildly. But Ilara had learned from her mistakes. She ducked, rolled, and darted out of the way. Each time she got closer. Each time she wore him down more and more. And then in a moment of pure luck, or maybe it was something more, Ilara saw her opening. Kale's blade swung past her, and she lunged forward, knocking him off balance. She drove her sword into his chest, not deep enough to kill him, but enough to bring him to his knees. The crowd went silent. Ilara stood over Kale, her sword still in his chest. Her breath came in sharp, quick bursts. She had done it. She had defeated the apex predator, at least for now. Kale slowly raised his head, his expression one of disbelief. He had underestimated her, and now he knew he had been beaten by a cadet. Ilara withdrew her sword and stood tall, her heart still racing. This battle wasn't just about survival. It was about sending a message, and the message was clear. Ilara was not someone to be taken lightly. The crowd erupted into applause, though their cheers were mixed with awe and disbelief. No one had expected the newcomer, the rookie, to come this close to taking down a legend. But she had done it. She had shown them all that she was more than just a cadet. She was a force to be reckoned with, and this was only the beginning. The unexpected turn. Ilara stood there, her breath still heavy in her chest, the weight of her victory sinking in. The cheers from the crowd felt distant, as though they belonged to someone else. She had just bested Kale, the apex predator, the undefeated champion. But she wasn't celebrating. Not yet. She had expected to feel a rush of triumph, to savor the moment, but instead all she felt was uncertainty. She had done what no one thought was possible, yet a lingering question haunted her thoughts. What now? She had won. But this battle, this small victory, wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of something much bigger. As Kyle staggered to his feet, gritting his teeth and clutching his side where Ilara's sword had landed, The crowd's excitement reached a fever pitch. They had seen something unexpected. Cadet, a rookie, had stood toe-to-toe with a legend and walked away victorious. The arena was buzzing with disbelief and awe, but Alara didn't let it affect her. She wasn't here for the glory. She was here for something else. Cale turned to face her, his expression darker now, his pride bruised more than his body. He was no longer the confident predator. Now he was a wounded animal, and wounded animals were dangerous. "You think you've won?" Cale's voice was cold, each word laced with venom. He wiped the sweat and blood from his brow, eyes narrowed into slits. "You've only just started to understand what it means to fight in this arena. Winning a battle doesn't mean you've won the war." Alara's grip tightened on her sword, her eyes narrowing as she studied him. He was right in a way. Winning against him was only a small piece of the puzzle. The arena was full of threats, full of challenges far beyond anything she had faced. She had taken down Cale, but she knew there were bigger fish waiting to take her down. The arena announcer's voice boomed again, breaking the tense silence. What a stunning turn of events. The cadet Alara has defeated Cale, the apex predator, in an unexpected upset. What a fight. What a display of skill. Alara wasn't sure if the applause was for her or for the spectacle of seeing the champion fall. She tried to focus, to ground herself. This wasn't about the crowd. It wasn't about the battle she had won. It was about surviving the next round, and the one after that. As the announcer's voice echoed through the arena, Alara's mind raced. She had gained a victory, but that victory came with consequences. Cale's defeat had shaken the entire arena. Now she wasn't just a cadet anymore. She was a target, and she had made powerful enemies. The moment Cale took a step toward her, his eyes burning with fury, Alara knew that the fight wasn't over. Cale was still a force to be reckoned with, but something about his anger unsettled her. It wasn't just the pain from his injury. It was something deeper. He wasn't used to losing, and that made him more dangerous than ever. "You might have beaten me," Cale spat, "but you've made a grave mistake. The arena doesn't forget, and neither do I." Alara didn't respond. She couldn't afford to waste her breath on him. She had learned something important in this fight. Cale's arrogance was his weakness, but that didn't mean he was finished. He would be back. And next time, he would come with everything he had. Kyle's threat hung in the air like a storm cloud waiting to burst. The crowd's cheers had faded into a low murmur, the atmosphere now thick with tension. Alara, despite her victory, felt the weight of the arena closing in on her. The training she had endured, the countless hours spent perfecting her skills, seemed almost insignificant now. She had taken down one opponent, but the real challenge was ahead. She would need to outwit, outfight, and outlast every other warrior who would now come for her. And they would come. Alara could feel it in her gut. Her victory had made her a target, and not just from Cale. There were others in the arena watching her every move, studying her weaknesses, waiting for their turn. As she turned to leave the arena, Alara caught the eyes of a few of the other cadets. They had been watching the fight closely, their expressions a mixture of admiration and fear. They knew she was no longer the underdog. She was a contender. And that made her dangerous, but it also made her vulnerable. The spotlight had shifted onto her, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for everything that would come with it. One of the cadets approached her, his face tense. "Alara," he said quietly, his voice unsure. "You did it. You really beat Cale. But you know what this means, right?" Alara's eyes flicked toward him, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Yeah," she replied softly. "I'm not just fighting for survival anymore. Now I've got a target on my back." The cadet nodded. "You're going to have to watch your back. Kyle won't take this lightly, and the others won't either. You've made a lot of people angry today." Alara exhaled slowly, her fingers brushing the hilt of her sword. "I'm ready." But was she? The battle against Cale had taught her one important lesson. Survival in the arena wasn't just about being the strongest. It was about being smart. It was about knowing when to strike, when to retreat, and when to hold your ground. And for the first time, Alara realized the arena wasn't just a place where warriors fought. It was a place where you had to outthink your enemies, not just outfight them. The fight had only just begun. The apex kneels. The hum of the arena, once deafening, had quieted into an eerie silence as Alara stood victorious, Kale's massive form kneeling before her. The echo of their battle still hung in the air, like the final notes of a song that had abruptly ended. She looked down at the apex predator, who was now vulnerable in a way he had never been before. His once confident expression was replaced with a look of disbelief, his pride shattered by the hands of a cadet. The crowd, still in shock, stayed quiet for a moment longer. And then, as if a switch had been flipped, the arena erupted. Cheers, gasps and screams filled the space. Alara didn't bask in the attention, though. She couldn't. Not yet. Kyle was still a threat, even on his knees. She knew the rules of the arena better than most. Victory today didn't guarantee survival tomorrow. She had to remain sharp. Kyle's breathing was heavy as he glared up at her, his hands trembling not from fear but from the pure, raw emotion of defeat. For the first time in a long while, someone had managed to humble him. His voice was a low growl as he struggled to push himself back to his feet. "You've made a mistake," Kyle spat, his voice dripping with venom. "You think you've won? You've only awakened something you can't control." Alara didn't flinch. She had been expecting this. A wounded lion was always more dangerous than a healthy one. But that didn't change the fact that she had taken him down. Something no one had dared believe possible. And now as Kale tried to stand, Alara realized something else, something more unsettling. There was more at play here than just strength. Kyle had been defeated, yes, but he had been defeated in front of an audience that would remember this moment. And they wouldn't forget her either. Kale's grip tightened on his blade as he slowly rose, his knees wobbling beneath him. The crowd had gone silent again, but the energy in the air was charged with anticipation. No one knew what would happen next. Was Kale going to challenge her again? Was this going to turn into a fight to the death right here, right now? But before Kale could make his move, the announcer's voice rang out, breaking the tension. What a battle, folks. What a shock. The young cadet Alara has brought the apex predator to his knees in an unforgettable victory. But don't go anywhere. The arena has just begun to heat up. More challenges await. Alara didn't have time to process the words. She was already scanning the crowd, her eyes darting to the shadows, to the places where the next danger might lurk. She could feel the eyes of the other warriors on her, cold, calculating, and hungry for their own shot at her. Kale was only the first. Kale growled as he straightened his back, trying to mask the pain in his side. "You'll regret this," he warned, his voice low and dangerous. "The arena remembers those who disrupt the balance. The power you've taken from me, it's not yours to hold." Before Alara could respond, the arena doors behind her creaked open. A hush fell over the crowd once more as another figure stepped into the arena. This one wasn't like Kale. This one felt different. Taller, more powerful. She could feel the weight of their presence before they even appeared fully into view. A figure clad in black, their face obscured by a dark helmet, moved forward with deliberate, almost mechanical precision. The air itself seemed to grow heavier as they approached, and Alara's instincts flared to life. This was no mere challenger. This was someone with a purpose. The new arrival didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their mere presence sent a chill down Alara's spine. The way they moved, the way they carried themselves, it was as if they had seen countless battles and emerged victorious in all of them. This wasn't just a warrior. This was a predator in its purest form. Kyle, now on his feet but clearly injured, turned toward the new figure, his expression filled with uncertainty. You're not with them, are you?" he muttered under his breath, his words more to himself than anyone else. The figure in black said nothing, only moving closer to Alara, as if they had been waiting for this very moment. Alara's mind raced. The appearance of this new challenger wasn't coincidence. It couldn't be. Her fight with Kale had attracted attention, yes, but it had also made her a target. But who was this figure? And why did they feel so different from the rest? The moment stretched long and Alara found herself standing tall, unflinching. There was no way out now. Kale had fallen, but a new danger had arrived, one that was darker, more terrifying. This new challenger was here to prove something, just like she had. "I don't know who you are," Alara finally said, her voice steady, "but you're not taking this victory from me." The figure in black tilted their head slightly as if considering her words. They raised their hand, slowly, and then pointed a single finger at her. In the stillness of the arena, it felt like an eternity. "Victory is temporary," the figure spoke at last, their voice low and emotionless. Survival is eternal." Without another word, the figure turned and vanished into the shadows, leaving the arena in stunned silence. The crowd was still processing what had just happened. Kale's anger was palpable, but even he knew better than to challenge this new figure. They were different, and Alara couldn't help but wonder, had she just survived her first test in the arena, or had she just become part of a much larger game? The weight of what had just transpired was starting to sink in. She hadn't just fought Kale, she had fought for her place in a world that had no room for mistakes. But this new challenger, the one who had appeared from the shadows, Alara had no idea who they were, but she knew this. Her journey had just gotten a whole lot more dangerous, and this time, the stakes weren't just her survival. They were something far bigger, something that would change everything. The dark truth revealed Alara had just made the impossible happen, defeating Kale, the apex predator, and yet, as the cheers of the crowd reverberated around her, something felt hollow. The victory was sweet, undeniably, but it wasn't the satisfaction she expected. There was no time to celebrate, no time to relish the applause. The fight was never truly over, and the arena was full of unanswered questions, dark whispers and threats yet to be revealed. As she walked toward the exit, trying to ignore the aching pain in her body from the fight, she felt a cold, unnerving presence behind her. At first, she thought it was just the lingering tension of the arena, her senses still on high alert, after such a grueling battle. But then she heard it, a voice, low, calm, yet filled with an eerie power. "You've done well. For a cadet." Alara froze. That voice wasn't just any voice. It carried an edge to it, one she recognized. Her heart skipped a beat as she turned to face the source. From the shadows, a figure stepped forward, their silhouette cloaked in darkness. They were tall, their movements deliberate and almost too graceful. The air itself seemed to shift as they entered her line of sight, as though the very atmosphere was aware of their presence. Alara's grip tightened on her sword, instinctively preparing for another fight, but the figure didn't come at her with hostility. Instead, they simply stood there, watching her with an unreadable gaze, a dark, familiar gaze. "I don't have time for games," Alara said, her voice steady but laced with caution. "Who are you?" The figure stepped closer, their steps so quiet, they almost seemed like whispers in the wind. When they spoke again, their voice was no longer cold but heavy with something darker, something far more ominous. "I am not your enemy, Alara." The figure's tone was smooth, almost soothing, but there was something in their eyes that made Alara's skin crawl. "But I am here to show you something, something that you can't ignore anymore." Her grip on her sword tightened further, her fingers burning with the urge to draw it, but she forced herself to hold back. There was something unsettlingly calm about the figure. They didn't seem like a warrior. They seemed like something else. Someone who had seen and experienced far more than Alara could fathom. The figure reached into their cloak and pulled out a small, shimmering object. It was a crystal, clear but swirling with colors that Alara couldn't quite identify. It glowed softly, casting eerie shadows on the figure's face. They held it out to Alara, their expression unreadable. "This," the figure began, "is what you need to understand. What you've just done, the victory, the battle, It's only a small part of something much bigger. The arena is just a front for a much darker purpose, a purpose that has been set into motion for years. Alara narrowed her eyes, suspicion bubbling in her chest. What are you talking about? The figure's eyes hardened, the weight of their words hanging in the air like a storm about to break. You've been chosen, Alara. Not by chance. Not by luck. This fight, this battle, everything you've done has led you here. To this point. To this moment. Alara took a step back, her mind racing. Chosen? She wasn't chosen for anything. She had fought for her place here, just like everyone else. There was no destiny, no grand plan. She had earned everything with her own strength, her own will. But the figure's eyes, their presence, made Alara question everything she thought she knew. Chosen for what? She asked, her voice steady, but betraying a flicker of doubt. The figure didn't answer immediately. Instead, they stepped closer, their gaze never leaving hers. The battles you face aren't just about strength, Alara. They're about power, true power. The kind that changes the fabric of this universe. The kind that can reshape destiny. Alara's breath caught in her throat. She had heard rumors, whispers, about the arena being more than just a spectacle, more than just a place to fight. But hearing it from this stranger, hearing them speak with such certainty, was different. This wasn't a game anymore. This was real. You have no idea what you've awakened by defeating Kale, the figure continued, their voice dropping to a whisper. The arena is a tool, a weapon, and you, Alara, you're at the center of something far bigger than you realize. Alara took another step back, the weight of the figure's words pressing down on her. Stop, you're talking in riddles. The figure didn't flinch. They held up the crystal again, this time glowing brighter as if responding to their words. This crystal is a key, Alara. A key to understanding what the arena is truly about. What Kale was guarding. What all of this is meant to protect. Alara's mind swirled. What was this person talking about? What did Kale have to do with any of this? She had thought Kale was just a champion, a threat to be defeated. But now it seemed like he was part of something bigger, something that she had no idea about. The figure's smile was almost imperceptible, like a shadow on their lips. The arena is a front, Alara. It's a test, a way to see who can survive, who can outlast the trials. But it's not about physical strength. It's about something more, a power that you've unknowingly tapped into. And now they will come for you. Those who want to control it. Those who want to destroy it. The words hit Alara like a punch to the gut. She had no idea what the figure was talking about, but she knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just about her. It wasn't about her training, her fight, her victory. She had just been pulled into something far darker than she could ever imagine. The figure began to retreat into the shadows, their words lingering in the air. You'll have to make a choice, Alara. Fight to survive, or fight to uncover the truth. But remember this. The arena is only the beginning. As the figure disappeared into the darkness, Alara stood frozen, the weight of their revelation crashing down on her. She had thought the battle with Kale was the hardest challenge she would face, but now she realized the real fight had just begun, and it was going to be far more dangerous than anything she could have prepared for. You said, the coming storm. The arena fell silent as Alara's gaze lingered on the shadows where the figure had disappeared. Her heart was still racing from the revelations she had just heard. The words echoed in her mind like a constant hum, growing louder and louder. The arena is a front. The battles are just tests. They will come for you. She had thought she was ready. She had trained for this. She had fought Kale and emerged victorious, against all odds. But now, standing alone in the aftermath of that victory, she realized something terrifying. This was bigger than her, bigger than anything she had prepared for. The crowd had quieted down, and the announcer's voice, usually so full of energy, now seemed distant and faint. The usual excitement was gone, replaced by a hushed uncertainty. It was clear. The arena was no longer just a place for spectacle and glory. It was a stage for something darker, something Alara wasn't equipped to understand. As Alara turned to leave the arena floor, she felt it. The air was thick with tension, as if the entire universe was holding its breath, waiting for something. The figure in black, the cryptic words, the glowing crystal, it was all part of a much larger plan. And she was at the center of it. Alara made her way to the exit, the weight of her sword suddenly feeling much heavier than before. Every step she took felt as though she was walking through a fog of uncertainty. She had won today, but the war, as the figure had said, was just beginning. Her mind raced with questions. What was the crystal? What did Kale's fall mean in the grand scheme of things? And who were the mysterious forces that were now watching her, waiting for her to make her move? Before she could reach the exit, a voice cut through her thoughts. It wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. Alara. She spun around, hand instinctively reaching for her sword, but the voice wasn't hostile. It was calm, measured, like the voice of someone who had seen and understood things she couldn't even begin to imagine. A figure stood in the shadows, just beyond the edge of the arena lights. Their face was obscured by a dark hood, but the voice was unmistakable. "Who are you?" Alara demanded, every muscle in her body tense. She wasn't in the mood for more cryptic conversations. She had been given enough riddles for one day. The figure took a step forward, their movements slow and deliberate. "I've been watching you, Alara, and I think you're finally starting to understand what's at stake." The figure's presence was powerful, though it wasn't physical. It was something else, something intangible. It made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. The figure stepped into the light, revealing a pair of piercing eyes that seemed to look right through her. Their face was sharp, defined, but not one she recognized. They were no one she had seen before. "I don't have time for games." "What do you want?" Alara's voice was tight with frustration. She was done with uncertainty. She wanted answers, and she wanted them now. The figure didn't immediately respond. Instead, they seemed to study her for a moment, almost as if weighing her very soul. Then they spoke, their voice soft yet firm. "You've been marked, Alara. By defeating Kale, you've set things in motion. You think the arena is your biggest challenge, but it's not. The arena is just a distraction. You've drawn the attention of those who pull the strings, the ones who control everything. They will come for you, and they will stop at nothing to make sure you don't uncover the truth." Alara's pulse quickened. She had feared this. The arena had been a testing ground, but she had never imagined there were forces watching from behind the curtains, forces that controlled everything. "Who are they?" Alara asked, her voice steady but betraying a hint of fear. "What do they want with me?" The figure's lips curled into a faint, knowing smile. "They want control. They want to shape the future, and they need someone with your potential. You're a piece in their game, Alara, and the moment you defeated Kale, you became their focus." Alara's mind raced.